Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm Jon Orr. We are two math teachers from makemathmoments.com who together,
with you, the community of math moment makers worldwide who want to build and deliver math lessons that spark curiosity,
fuel sense making,
and ignite your teacher moves. Jon, if I'm not mistaken, we are number 200. And my friend, I cannot believe it. It feels like just yesterday we started this crazy thing we call the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm super excited to dive into this episode. How are you feeling as we enter the 200s?
Yeah, you know, when we think back to starting this, I think we were like, we're going to make this a weekly thing, a weekly episode. And, we never had a timeline. We were just like, we're just going to make them until we can't make them anymore. And you know what? I don't know if I ever thought that far ahead that we would get to episode 200. I hoped we would get there. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to say, that we've been doing this for 200 episodes, which sounds like a lot, Kyle. It sounds like 200 hours. Does that sound right? I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
Some of them are hours.
You know what?
Some of them
might even
hours.
be more.
Well, they average maybe into like 50 minutes, I'll say. But 200. Yeah. It's been a journey. It's been awesome. We've learned so much along the way, talking to the guests, talking amongst ourselves, which is what we're doing here with you. It's just Kyle and I. We don't have a guest. We're going to talk all things about how to build an effective math teacher, and we've got some ideas. We've been doing some learning. We've been putting some ideas together on thinking about what goes into effective professional development. Like, what are the elements that help a teacher move along their journey? And we've been doing a lot of that work with the districts we work with on a regular basis as well.
Absolutely. And, something that I think is really awesome, because this is episode 200. And if we sort of start back with why we started this podcast in the first place, and it's for this very reason, right? It's for helping to develop stronger, more confident mathematics educators. And in turn, like, community out by doing this, but like selfishly, as we've said before, we are also benefiting as well. This opportunity to reflect, to share, to think, to challenge one another. These are really important pieces. And, it took us a really long time to sort of connect the dots. And we've talked about this before where, both you and I, Jon, we sort of, came into mathematics education with this mindset, with the belief that just right. And what we believe, we thought we knew a lot about math. And it turns out that, we knew a little bit about procedural mathematics, right? We didn't really know the content as well or as deeply as we thought we did. And, as we went down this rabbit hole over our careers, which, now both of us having taught for you're going to be closing in on 20 years pretty soon. I'm just past that 15-year mark. And, it took us a really long time to sort of start connecting the dots and realize that, oh my gosh, learn here. And actually just knowing math, even if we knew the math deeper than we did when we came in, there's some other elements there. And we're going to start picking each other's brains here to try to reveal this for the group.
Yeah, Kyle, and I think, I have a very similar story, obviously, being a high school teacher. And I think a lot of us high school teachers, I guess I don't want to speak for everyone, but the high school teachers I've talked to, the high school, me being a high school teacher, my father was a high school teacher. I think we get into, we've said this here before on the podcast, that I got into teaching probably because I like the math and I like the procedural nature of the mathematics. And I think, I had this thought that if I was like what you said, if I'm good here, I know math and I get it. And so we get into math, teaching, thinking that I'll be okay teaching math because I know the math. And we know from talking with so many people here on the podcast, and all the learning we've been doing for the last 10 years or longer, that was not the case, right? There's more to this job than teaching math. And I think we need reminders sometimes, because, sitting at the lunchroom table, you're talking with a teacher across the way, and they're coming and they're saying how terrible of a class they just had, or maybe they're saying how great a class they just had, or they're talking about their lesson. And oftentimes I feel like, well, they're talking about like giving those examples and they're getting their math out, and then it's like, hey, I get to go and I get to do my marking now. And I know that there's a lot more to this job than say just knowing math and spitting it out to kids. And that's what we want to talk about here. And as if I'm going to, if we're going to build better educators, or we're going to build, an effective math teacher, there's more to just knowing the content. There's pedagogical content knowledge, which has multiple parts, right, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you kind of gave an interesting perspective, maybe unique to some who are listening, right? Those who are not high school teachers,
right,
may not have the same experience that you and I had, where, we came in, like I said, almost like overconfident in how we were going to deliver math, because we thought we knew a thing or two about the content. You learned that, we knew how to teach it in one way with steps and procedures, that rush to the algorithm we talk about quite often, which was, again, a rude awakening for us. But then if we look on the other end of the spectrum, we have some fellow colleagues who are teaching in depending where you're from, like in Ontario, for example, from kindergarten through grade 8, typically, you might have majored in really anything in post-secondary. You could have majored in English or literacy or the arts. You could have majored in human kinetics. You could have majored in math, and some teachers
science.
are teaching in elementary or science or anything like that. But the reality is that there's a lot of teachers in the elementary panel who, and I say a lot, I don't have like a stat to share with anyone, but there's oftentimes, if they didn't have a math background, then they didn't even have that sort of confidence coming in, which again might be good or bad depending on how you look at it. Maybe good from the perspective that they knew that they might have had to do a thing or two to try to get themselves prepared. But on the other hand, if you're coming in maybe not feeling super confident with the content already, that can definitely, sort of let a little bit of air out of your tires, right? When you're trying to get going, trying to get some momentum. So that's a huge, huge challenge. And, some of the research would suggest that, it's not enough, is basically what the research is saying. It's not enough to just know something about the mathematics, right? In particular, I think it was this research from Fenema and Frank, and we'll put the link in the show notes. It said, if teachers do not know how to translate abstractions into a form that enables learners to relate the mathematics to what they already know, they will not learn with understanding. So that kind of, to me, it hits home for both ends of the spectrum, whether you're like, a high school teacher who knew a thing or two about math, or whether maybe you were an elementary teacher who didn't have a math background, or maybe didn't feel super confident in mathematics. The reality is, it sort of doesn't matter if we don't have a way in order to help students take this learning and make it make sense in their own lives. And that's where that pedagogical knowledge comes in, that pedagogical content knowledge fits. And one of the challenges I think we all face, Jon, is like, where do we go to get this stuff, right? Like you can't just, hope one day that you'll wake up and you have it. Where can we start in order to try to build our own mathematics?
Well, just before we talk about that piece, I want to talk about that pedagogical content knowledge, kind of that framework right there. It's like it's got pieces like, I got to know the content. Obviously, we just said that, a math teacher feels like they know the content. Then you've got to know, you got to know the teaching part, right? You got to know like how to teach and get that out. Like you just said, like that's that pedagogy piece. But the other part too is like, and I've shared a story a while ago about teaching accounting. You also have to know the curriculum, right? You have to know what the course curriculum, the course standards, the progression of standards has to be as well. That story, Kyle, from a while ago, is I think it's got to be at least 5 years ago. I had to teach a section of accounting, and I had not taught accounting before, and I was thrown in to teach accounting at the last minute. And
you're like, I know how to add and subtract stuff.
Right,
Isn't that
right.
what accounting is?
Exactly.
So
it's like I feel confident in the ability to do this, except that I did not know the curriculum. I didn't know that, the order of progression of what needed to be taught when, and I fumbled, and I wanted to do all these amazing, I was used to teaching math, for all this time, and I was implementing all these great math strategies in my math classroom. But when I translated over to accounting, it was like, it was like a brand new teacher again. I just had to survive. And I was teaching again, very procedurally and very kind of bland, very kind of like, I didn't have like that repertoire of activities for that classroom and to know the curriculum itself. So I feel like there's like this 3-pronged approach. And if you're watching over on YouTube right now, Kyle's put up an image from the research that we've been using here from Cullum and Wu, and this it almost looks like this big bucket, and really we got these 3 prongs here, but like content, teaching, and curriculum. We got to know all 3 of these pieces of the pedagogical content knowledge. But it comes in, and you'll see right at the top of this kind of bucket, which is probably the most important. It all comes from your belief. Like, what is your belief about pedagogical content knowledge? And I think, Kyle, this is where it changed for us, is because we came into teaching and we had this belief that I'm going to be, okay math teacher because I know the math and I like math. I like kids. I think this will be a fine job. And then what happened for us was that content knowledge, like with these beliefs of ours, kind of started to get shifted because of the way the teaching. So this pedagogy, it's almost like there's like this cycle happening here, and it's actually represented in the picture. And for me, it was like I wanted to teach math this way. We wanted engagement. We wanted more kids to ask questions. Like these things started to change. So some pedagogy started to change, and then we realized moving over to the content knowledge side of things, we were like, you know what? Some of this pedagogy is forcing me to think about actually how deeply I know the mathematics, because I thought I knew the mathematics, but I think, having a degree in mathematics, I realized later that I knew a procedural view of mathematics, not a very conceptual understanding of math. We've said here lots of times, a common example is not understanding one visual representation of the Pythagorean theorem is these actual squares on the side of the triangle. Like that blew my mind as a teacher. Talking about your two ways of division, the 2 types of division, that blew your mind as a teacher. Like we didn't know that. And so what happened was that pedagogy piece started to like influence the content piece, but then it came back and started influencing the pedagogy piece, because we're like, now we realize that we have to change where our understanding of the content is different. Now we have to change our teaching strategies to reflect that new knowledge that we have. And we have to keep referring to the curriculum. And it all came from our beliefs of how we want to view teaching mathematics.
And it's funny because for those on YouTube, you can see this image here, but Jon, you described it pretty well. Like it's almost like picture this bucket, and like beliefs is like almost like part of the handle, or it's like a rope attached to this handle that goes down to this bubble that says pedagogical content knowledge. And it's interesting because as you were talking, I was envisioning when I first came into teaching, I had my beliefs, like everyone has them, whether you like it or not, you have, right? And whether you're aware of them or not, they're there. And those can shift over time, of course. But my beliefs sort of made me think that this was an empty bucket. So those who are watching, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about here, because it's like the edges of the bucket are content, and on the other edge is curriculum. And like when I came in, it was like I thought I had content. So I thought I had like that part good to go. Turns out I didn't. It turns out that I actually had a content specific area, in particular around, you know, how mathematics actually works and how it develops and how one concept connects to another. From the research is telling us that actually, like, in order to make connections and have new learning with understanding, we need to be able to connect it to some of our prior knowledge and to the world around us and all of those things. And then on the other hand, it was like, oh, as a new teacher, I was like, I don't know the curriculum very well. You know, like I know content, but I'm not exactly sure what I need to teach. And you addressed that or articulated that well with your accounting example, where, you know, you come in, you're like, I'm not exactly sure what I need to teach to this class. So I'm working on the edge of this bucket. But for many years, I completely interior of this bucket, which is a bunch of bubbles that comes right straight down. One is teaching. And then underneath it, look at how complex that is, John. Underneath teaching, which you would think, like, you'd think I thought about that as a teacher, that like I would have to know a thing or two about how to teach the math. But it turns out that, you know, I didn't. I just thought it was about knowing it and then just telling kids and everything was going to be great. But underneath there, from teaching, it says like knowing students' thinking. And then from knowing students' thinking, it's like addressing students' misconceptions, engaging students in math learning, building on students' math ideas, promoting students' thinking of mathematics, and all of these things. So picture that curriculum and those bubbles under teaching all point to the bottom of this bucket that you're describing for us, which is student learning. So there's like 3 arrows that point to student learning. And really, I had I'm going to say a dotted arrow coming from content, because it wasn't a complete understanding of content. And I had like an almost non-existing curriculum arrow for a very long time until you get familiar with the curriculum. And then I had nothing coming down the middle, which is that 3rd arrow pointing to student learning. And I'm telling you right now, John, it's taken you and I a really long time. And, you know, we're at 200 episodes. It's taken us a long time and a lot of learning, a lot of presenting, a lot of conferences. And, you know, we're still learning, like we're still trying to put this bucket together. Each and every day we learn something new about how math works. And with every single thing that we learn here, it strengthens all of these arrows, all of these connections, so that we can help address student learning more effectively, so that more students feel good about being mathematicians themselves. So, you know, for this particular episode, John, I think, you know, some people are sitting there going like, okay, like this is complex. There's a lot to this. Now, what do I do if I'm an educator? You know, where do I go? How can I access some learning in order to strengthen content, curriculum, teaching, which we're going to call all together, lumped together as pedagogical content knowledge? Where can people go? Because here's the other sad reality, John, is that not every educator in every district has the benefit of receiving professional learning or development in their own districts, right? Sometimes it's only a handful of educators. Sometimes it's no one at all, depending on funding. So what are some ideas that we can share? One of them, I'm going to say, they already know, it's the podcast. They're listening to it right now. This is obviously a great source for you to keep that going. But let's start digging into some other options.
For sure. And I like that you pointed it out, right? Like if we're going to build effective educators. So if I'm a district leader, one of my tasks is to support and build on build my educators to be the best teachers that they can be. I think we've just kind of said it with this bucket, is that we have to build out our understanding of pedagogical content knowledge, which involves the content knowledge, like knowing the mathematics, knowing the conceptual understanding of the mathematics and the procedural understanding of the mathematics. And then the teaching strategies are important. And then also knowing your curriculum, your particular course, and say the progression of ideas. So we need to build on all 3 of those. And like you said, Kyle, there's lots of ways that we've been learning over the years. One is we listen to lots of different podcasts, not to, not just to talk with people on our podcast, but we listen to other podcasts to build that content knowledge and to build that pedagogical knowledge. One way that we get our hands on as many books as we can. One way for the teaching or the pedagogical knowledge, I grabbed Dylan Williams' book on assessment last year and dove into that, and that was the basis for a lot of the learning that we did with our assessment for growth course and our assessment for growth days with our students. Getting our hands on books. The professional learning communities at our schools have been great. In my past, we've been lucky to have lesson study for a number of years in our building. So we partnered up with other teachers. We co-planned lessons. We watched each other deliver those lessons. That was an amazing experience. And I remember learning that. That's got to be one of probably the most beneficial professional development experiences I've been a part of, is going through that process of being in other teachers' classrooms, watching the students interact with the things that we developed. Because when you're teaching, you don't get to see some of those things that you can see when you're not, say, facilitating a lesson. That you get the behind the scenes kind of look at that. Those things for sure. And then you can pivot to conferences, right? Like you can say, hey, look, we're recording this, mid to end of September. We're actually getting ready to head out to Los Angeles or Anaheim to head to the NCSM, to NCTM conference for 2022. We'll be heading out there. Like, conferences have been also they're a wealth of knowledge. You can pick and choose who you're going to go see, what resources you're going to get. I know that I've pulled lots of different classroom activities from attending those conferences. OAME is always a big one, and we do that in the springtime here in Ontario. Going to conferences, not only, getting resources, getting ideas, but meeting people, sharing ideas. They've been invaluable. Kyle, I think we even met for the first time at a conference, like face to face.
Absolutely.
So, you can't discount, say, going to conferences if you can, but like you said, not everybody can get to a conference because they cost thousands of dollars. Like, to fly to a place like Los Angeles, even in Ontario, we would have to drive. It's always near Toronto. That's a 3-hour drive for us. That's a couple night stay in a hotel. The conference themselves are not cheap. Yeah, you're running like $500 a ticket just to get in and go to these sessions. So even online conferences last year, we're charging money to attend an online conference. Big ticket items, school boards sometimes don't foot the bill for those. Schools don't foot the bills for those. So sometimes that kind of makes a disconnect with the professional development that we can access. So those are some places that we build those areas. More probably when you go to a conference, more of the time you're getting your pedagogical knowledge, right? You're getting your teaching knowledge of strategies or lessons and activities from these, maybe belief changes when you're going to these conferences as well. Kyle, where would you go to build your content knowledge, like your math understanding knowledge? What has probably been for you the most useful resource or way that you've built that for you? Because I know that you've done a ton of learning on the content knowledge side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue, like, for me, what got me thinking about it is some of my conference experiences, be it face-to-face or personal, or live, face-to-face or personal. Virtual, I think, is what I meant to say.
Right.
So there's a lot of great learning that can happen, and sometimes it just takes almost like a little light bulb for you to go off, to go, oh. And before I dive into a specific scenario, and I have shared this before on a few podcasts, and we've had some wonderful guests come on who I did some learning with through this particular experience. But just kind of backing up to the whole in-person conference experience and the cost associated. If I'm sitting there and I'm, maybe you're an educator, maybe you're a district leader, when you think about it, it's almost as if like conferences themselves, I think typically who you run into are people who are in like coaching roles or district mentor roles or district leader roles of some type, where it's almost like they're going out from districts. They're being sent out like a small group, like almost like a little troop goes out to like capture as much as they can and then bring it, whatever they can, back, and then like share that to, educators in their own district, and the challenge, there's a few challenges there, right? So you go out, you get this message, and you come back. First of all, you were only there for a couple of days, which means you heard maybe a speaker speak for 60 minutes, and they might have an amazing message. But is that like enough time for it to really resonate with you enough to be able to feel confident enough to go back and then share that? Some challenges there. For me, the experience that really sort of like shifted my thinking was that proportional reasoning symposium that I was a part of, a small niche group of educators that came together and researchers who basically argued about what is a proportion or a proportional relationship basically for an entire weekend. And it was like, first of all, it was like overwhelming. But what I realized in that experience was how little I really knew. Like when somebody says, what is a proportional relationship? And everyone in the room comes up with a different definition that aren't just like synonymous. Like they weren't just like, oh yeah, that's just another way of saying the same thing. It was like, no, that actually means something different. That's really eye-opening. And that was sort of the experience for me. But if I'm an educator listening, or if I'm a district leader listening, and you're thinking like, how do I get more of that? Like there's a book that I think is amazing. I actually have it right here on my desk, and the new version of it, or an updated version, is coming out. We had Jennifer Bay Williams on. She was one of the co-authors with Van de Waal. And this particular book right here has so much in it. It's a pretty thick one. But it's not like a straight read. Like you could go cover to cover, but really there's sections where it actually breaks down different content pieces where it kind of, you read through it and sometimes you go, what does that mean? And then like you reread it again and you start to realize again, like that you don't know maybe as much as you thought you did. And it's not to make you feel bad about yourself, but so that you just kind of know like, there's more to this story. And the more I understand, the better off I'm going to be to try to help students in my classroom. Now, that brings me though, Jon, to like, so if conferences are challenging for educators to get to because of the cost, supply teacher, like some districts are just like, we can't let you go because there's no one to cover your class while this is going on. Like sometimes it's not even a money issue. I mean, oftentimes it is. The challenge again, if you are lucky enough to get out to NCTM, you go out there or you go to the local conference or whatever it might be, you're like, you get a bunch of these presentations, but then you sort of come back and it's sort of like, it was great to be there live in person, but I don't really have an opportunity to kind of like re-experience that scenario. Like what else might people do if they're going, I don't have this opportunity, but I do want to start digging in a little bit here so that I can find someone. Like for me, Van de Waal was a huge one for me. Kathy Fosno is a big one. Like to find your person that resonates with you, that you want to do some more learning from. Where can people potentially go that isn't going to, cause them to have to drain the bank account?
Well, that's when you reach out and you register for an online conference, Kyle. That's why we build. So you've nailed. You were kind of like being coy there a little bit, right? It's like, where could you go?
Jon, can you help? Can you help answer this question?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. But if you've been listening to our podcast for, maybe you've listened for all 200 episodes, put your hand up right now if you have. Wow.
Look at you all.
But if you've been around that long, you know that every year we host a an online conference. And the reason is what Kyle was, alluding to. He wasn't doing it to kind of like, hey, let's make sure we talk about that thing. It's the reason we host our online conference in November every year is for the reasons that you just stated, is that we want to make as we want to bring professional development to as many people as we can, for as an accessible, as accessible as it can be. So that is why we designed that conference. Like, this is why we do the podcast, right? The podcast is a free medium that you can consume to give you a spark of like learning to go off and explore that idea more, or go that idea more. That's really why we designed the podcast. And then the summit, our virtual summit in November, is taking that a little bit further. We cover the costs. We get sponsors to cover the costs so that it's completely free for you. It's online, so there's not as many costs as you think. So we don't have to worry. And this is sometimes why we are wondering why all those last few years that some of those virtual conferences were charging money. It's because, well, we've been running a virtual conference for 4 years and it's free. Let's just make it free. And this is the reason we do that is so that everyone could participate in that week. And all you need is the internet, which we probably, most of us all have. You need a computer, and that's it, and some time. And you're going to be like, look, I'm going to watch 1, 2, maybe 3 sessions on a Saturday or a Sunday. And I'm going to also experience these professional development sessions that are just like the ones that are at NCTM. Like this week, we're going to see Nat Banting in Los Angeles live face to face, but he's also presenting in November at our conference in the virtual summit. Kyle, I know that you're excited for Kathy Fosno being one of your kind of go-to people for a lot of learning, and we've talked with her on the podcast. We're excited. I think this is her first time joining us in the summit this year.
Second time.
Because
this is our 4th summit. I know there's a lot of sessions there. I think we're going to be closing in over 100 sessions, I think, in total this year. Yeah. It'll be like in total. Yeah. We'll have over 100 sessions that have happened at that summit, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So it's like, this is the reason is we want to make sure that anyone can access the high quality professional development that people who go to conferences get. And this is why we've made it free. And we think it has to be free for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, one thing I will say is that, sure, if I had the option to go see the people at the summit live in person versus watching it on, a webinar format, of course, I'm going to take the in-person, any day of the week. However, if one is going to cost me thousands of dollars to do, that's a harder commitment to make. And this one is going to be 100% free for you to engage in live over that entire weekend, weekend of November 19th and 20th, 2022.
Mark it down.
Yeah, mark that thing down. And registration is open for those who are listening at makemathmoments.com/summit. You just to be able to access that. And in particular, the people I'm talking to specifically are those who may not have the opportunity to go to too many conferences, right? Like if you're that person listening, like you've got to check it out. And here's the other thing though. If you're listening because you're the type of person who is going to be at NCTM with us next week and NCSM, if you're that person, don't just like go, oh, I've been to conferences, so I'm not going to sign up. Even if you don't think you need to, because you've done all these live ones, you need to share it with your colleagues, share it with your coworkers, with your friends who are in education, because the reality is that for a lot of people, if they're not listening to the podcast, like the people who are listening to the podcast are the type of people who are likely going to sign up for the summit and they're going to attend it. So that's awesome. But what I really want to advocate that you do is, I mean, it's great for you that you get to improve your math pedagogical content knowledge. But in order to get better alignment across your school, across your district, you want to be sharing this opportunity and not just sharing once. Like you want to be encouraging people. And actually, Jon, this year in particular, we made like a really intentional effort to be reaching out to our district leaders that we have that we know of that are in the Math Moment Maker community, because you friends have a lot of influence in terms of spreading news to educators, but also you also have the opportunity to kind of nudge towards people considering doing something. Now, it is on a weekend, so that is something like people will have to sort of go, okay, I'm going to have to take some of my own free time to do this. But district leaders also have opportunities. And Jon, we've got some great links in our show notes for our district leaders to grab some great guides that will help to at least give some of your colleagues some of the why. Like, you heard this podcast, so you know why content knowledge is important and pedagogical content knowledge is important, but they may not. So we've tried to craft some resources that will make it easier for you to help communicate that why to your colleagues. So more of them are willing to raise their hand and take part. And we even have some opportunities as well for districts to potentially replays to colleagues throughout the entire school year. So this is kind of like a specific pitch towards our district leaders that, just sharing it one time, you will get a handful that will sign up. But if we're strategic about it, you can promote active mathematics learning over an entire weekend and potentially make some real big beliefs and understanding of content or pedagogical content knowledge shifts, which can really help you get closer to those district level goals.
For sure, for sure. So if you are that district leader, you can actually head to the show note links below, or you can go right now to makemathmoments.com/summit district. That's makemathmoments.com/summit district. And then you can grab our 3 steps to sharing professional development and also our workbook that guides you on how to share that with your teachers, gives you sampled emails, sample strategies, sample timelines.
Yeah, it's really like a full-blown plan, right? Like step-by-step guide,
right?
And will help you kind of craft that message in a way that's going to resonate with your educators in the most impactful way. So now let's not forget about everyone else who isn't a district leader. So you friends already heard where you can go to sign up, and that's at makemathmoments.com/summit. And that, my friend, will get you signed up and ready to go. And of course, that link, you can share it far and wide, and we encourage you to share it far and wide. So we really kind of have 2 calls to action here. So, I mean, our main call to action is that we want you actively seeking opportunities for yourself, or to continue seeking those opportunities to develop your own mathematics content and pedagogical content knowledge. So in order to do that, or one way you can do that, is signing up for that summit and sharing that summit. So not only helping yourself, but make sure you're helping others and encouraging others, not shaming others if they're not interested or they can't and they have family commitments, but ensuring that they know what's there and why it's important for us to all continue to grow our own understanding of the math and the pedagogical approaches that we use in the classroom.
Awesome. Awesome. So we were really hoping we've had in the past, thousands and thousands of teachers register for that weekend and participate in that weekend. So we are super excited to do it again. And we are looking forward to seeing you in one of those live sessions. They are all live sessions. There are no recorded sessions. So we will probably see you in one of those, I'm sure. So in order, to ensure you don't miss out on our new episodes, as we've just ended this one, be sure to hit subscribe on your podcast platform. If this is your first episode, welcome, and just hit subscribe right now. If this is your 200th episode, congratulations. You are right here with us. Yes, you are right here with us. And you probably already hit subscribe. So great job there. Show notes and links to resources from this episode and transcripts can be downloaded. They can be downloaded from the web. You can head to makemathmoments.com/episode 200. Again, that's makemathmoments.com/episode 200.
Well, Jon, listen, I think by now people have already signed up for that summit at makemathmoments.com/summit.
They jumped over right away.
District friends have headed over to makemathmoments.com/summit district to get all their amazing goodies. And well, until next time, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm Jon Orr.
High fives for us.
And a high five for you.